In 1463, 23 Christian nuns were dragged into the dungeons beneath Topkapi Palace and locked away from the world. For the next 40 years, they were slaves scrubbing floors, washing linens, erased from history. But here's what the Ottoman records don't tell you: every night, they carved crosses into stone until their fingers bled. And 5 centuries later, those crosses are still there, along with voices that won't stop singing. What happened in that cell defies everything we know about human endurance. 8 seconds. That's how long Sister Eleni listened to the monastery bell die. She counted each ring, 1, 2, 3, 4, her lips moving in prayer. She didn't believe anymore. By the 8th ring, the sound had faded into the mountains of Thessaly, and with it, 37 years of her life. They're burning the fields. Sister Theodora stood at the window, 23 years old, hands shaking. Outside, smoke rose in black columns. "Why burn what you can use?" Theodora whispered. Eleni knew why. Because the Ottomans weren't here to conquer, they were here to erase. The banners came over the ridge at dawn, crimson and gold. No trumpets, no war cries, just hooves and steel, methodical as clockwork. An empire that had spent 500 years perfecting the mathematics of conquest. In the courtyard, Mother Superior Anastasia stood watching her crucifix catching morning light. 71 years old, bent from decades of prayer, but her voice cut through the fear like a blade. "Sisters, chapel, now." They moved fast, 23 women, 16 to 71, their habits rustling like wings. No panic, no screaming. They'd known this was coming ever since Constantinople fell 13 years ago. Every Christian monastery in Anatolia knew. The question was never if, only when. Inside the chapel, beneath Christ Pantocrator's painted eyes, they knelt. Eleni stared at the fresco of St. Catherine, broken on her wheel face, serene in agony, and thought, is that what faith looks like when it's dying? Peace. She didn't feel peaceful. She felt sick. The doors opened. Not kicked, just pushed. Authority doesn't need violence. Hassan Pasha entered like he owned the air itself. White robes, immaculate turban, precise beard trimmed to aristocratic perfection. Behind him, 6 janissaries in scarlet stood motionless. He didn't draw his sword. He drew a scroll. "You have a choice," he said in flawless Greek. No accent, no hesitation. "Convert to Islam and serve the empire with honor. You'll teach girls in Istanbul. You'll live in dignity, new names, new lives, new purpose." Silence. "Or refuse, and you'll be relocated to Constantinople to serve the palace until you see reason." Mother Anastasia rose, joints cracking audibly. "And if we refuse both?" Hassan Pasha's eyes flickered. Not anger. Something worse. Pity. "The Sultan doesn't acknowledge that option. Convert or serve. Those are your only futures." "Then we choose a third." Anastasia's voice didn't waver. "We stay what we are." "You choose suffering. We choose fidelity." He studied her face like a physician examining a patient beyond saving. "Very well. Sunrise. Bring nothing. Your vows of poverty should make that easy." He turned, then stopped. "One more thing. The bell tower comes down at sunset. Anyone who touches that bell dies. Clear." Sister Theodora gasped. "You'd silence God's voice." Hassan Pasha looked at her almost kindly. "Child, I've silenced 1,000 of God's voices. This one won't cost me any sleep." The door closed. Janissaries remained outside. Even in their own chapel, they were prisoners. That night, no one slept. They prayed, but not the gentle prayers of morning mass. These were older prayers, desperate prayers, the kind that came from catacombs when faith meant choosing between apostasy and lions. Sister Maria, once a scholar in Trebizond, read from Revelation by candlelight. "They will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will triumph because he is Lord of lords and King of kings." "Are we faithful or fools?" Sister Irene, the second oldest voice cracking. "How do we even tell the difference anymore?" Eleni surprised herself. Maybe they looked the same. Maybe they always did. Past midnight, something shifted. The fear crystallized into something harder. They began to sing, not loud, not defiant, just persistent. Hymns from the 4th century, melodies older than Islam, songs that had survived Huns and Goths and plague and schism. Theodora's soprano rose above them all. Though darkness covers the earth, the Lord rises upon you, and his glory appears over you. Outside, a janissary shifted uncomfortably, muttered something in Turkish. They weren't used to victims who sang. Dawn came too fast. Hassan Pasha returned with soldiers and pack animals. Time. They walked out into morning light that felt obscene, too beautiful, too indifferent. Spring had turned Thessaly green. Birds sang. The sky was cloudless. The world didn't care they were ending. Wrists. Soldiers moved forward with rope, not chains yet. Rope was enough for women who wouldn't fight. One soldier, maybe 19, avoided Eleni's eyes as he tied her hands. "Sorry," he whispered in broken Greek. "Then don't." He flinched like she'd slapped him, but he finished the knot. They were being led toward the road when Theodora broke. She ran not away toward the chapel, threw open the doors and sprinted for the bell tower stairs. 2 janissaries lunged after her, but she was young and desperate and fast. Her footsteps echoed up the stone spiral. Hassan Pasha didn't move, just watched. Theodora reached the bell chamber. They could see her silhouette against the sky through the open windows. She grabbed the rope. The bell rang once. One perfect note rolling across the valley like thunder. The arrow took her in the back before the echo died. She fell forward over the bell, silencing it. Blood ran down the bronze in thin streams, mixing with green patina. Mother Anastasia screamed, not words, just anguish raw and animal. Hassan Pasha closed his eyes. "I told you the cost." He turned to his archer. "Bring her down, gently. Bury her with honor." They wrapped Theodora in her own habit and buried her in the garden she'd tended for 5 years. No priest, no liturgy, just women weeping and a wooden cross that would be gone by nightfall. Eleni knelt at the grave dirt under her fingernails and whispered to Anastasia. She rang it. The whole valley heard. And what did that accomplish? Anastasia's voice was dead. She's gone, and we're still here. She reminded them we have voices. That matters. Does it? Tell me how any of this matters. Eleni looked at the fresh earth, the blood-stained cross, the mountains that didn't care. Because if it doesn't, if resistance means nothing, then Theodora died for nothing. And I won't believe that. I can't. They marched at midday. 22 now. The monastery stayed standing. Hassan Pasha explained it would become a barracks or caravanserai. We don't destroy unnecessarily, he said. We transform. That's the strength of empire. As they descended the mountain path, smoke rose from the chapel. They were burning the manuscripts, 500 years of scripture and commentary, and illuminated gospels turning to ash. The smell followed them, sweet and acrid. Knowledge dying. 3 days on foot. No one said where they were going, but everyone knew. Constantinople, the heart of Christendom that now belonged to someone else. At night they huddled on cold ground. No shelter, just earth and stars. On the second night, Sister Maria started coughing deep, wet sounds that shook her whole frame. By the third night, she was spitting blood. She needs medicine, Eleni told Hassan Pasha. She needs to convert. We have the finest physicians in Constantinople. Accept Islam and she'll be treated. And if we refuse, then Allah decides. Maria died on the 4th morning, just as they saw the sea. They buried her by the roadside with stones marking the spot. 21 now. That evening, sunset turned the Bosphorus crimson, and there it was, Constantinople, Istanbul, the city crowned with minarets instead of crosses. The Hagia Sophia dominated everything, that massive dome silhouetted against red sky, a crescent moon gleaming where the cross had been. Sister Irene started crying. My grandmother prayed in that church. She said it would stand forever. Nothing stands forever, Hassan Pasha said, apparently listening. Except change. They were loaded onto a galley the next morning. Below deck, the air was thick with tar and salt and human misery. They could hear other prisoners' men chained to oars, their existence reduced to rowing, eating, sleeping, rowing, until their bodies gave out. The ship lurched from shore. Through deck gaps, sunlight fragmented on water. Eleni pressed her face to the wood, drinking in the light, knowing it might be her last. Where are they taking us? Sister Anna whispered. 16 years old, the youngest now. Does it matter? Eleni's voice came out harsher than she meant. We're already where they want us, powerless, isolated, forgotten. God hasn't forgotten. Hasn't he? The words escaped before Eleni could stop them. Theodora prayed. Maria prayed. We all prayed. And we're still here sailing towards some hole in the earth where we'll disappear forever. Anna's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. Then we don't pray for rescue. We pray for endurance. And when we can't endure, we pray our suffering means something. That's all faith ever was, insisting that suffering has meaning even when we can't see it. The ship docked at twilight beneath Topkapi Palace's shadow. They were led through servants' entrances, past marble corridors and gold-leaf ceilings, past rooms where silk-robed officials worked by lamplight, past harems guarded by eunuchs, past kitchens preparing feasts they'd never taste. Then down, stone stairs spiraling into darkness, torches guttering, temperature dropping until their breath came out in clouds. Down into the palace bowels, into foundations older than the Ottomans, older than Byzantium. Down into stone that remembered emperors whose names had been forgotten. They stopped before an iron door. Hasan Pasha unlocked it with a key on a chain around his neck. The hinges screamed. This is where you live. You'll work above during the day, cleaning, washing, serving. At night, you return here. You don't speak to other servants. You don't discuss your faith. You don't pray aloud. Accept these terms and your lives will be tolerable. Resist, and you'll discover the Sultan's mercy has limits. Mother Anastasia stepped forward, face pale but chin up. If we refuse to work, you don't eat. No malice, just fact. Obey and survive. Resist and fade. The choice is always yours. He turned to leave, paused. Guards pass this door every 2 hours. They report suspicious sounds, singing, chanting, raised voices. Anything suggesting organized resistance. Those reports result in discipline. Understood. They understood. They weren't just prisoners. They were secrets meant to be kept silent until they ceased to exist. The door closed. Darkness swallowed them whole. In that darkness, Sister Eleni spoke words that would sustain them for 40 years. They can take our freedom. They can take our light. But they cannot take our voices unless we surrender them. And I will never surrender mine. 21 women stood in absolute blackness. 21 voices whispered back, neither will we. Outside, Hasan Pasha paused at the top of the stairs. His lieutenant waited. Why keep them alive, sir? Why not just... Because corpses don't convert, Hasan Pasha said quietly. But broken spirits do. Give them time. Darkness. Hunger. Isolation. They'll beg for Islam within a month. And if they don't? Hasan Pasha descended the stairs without answering. He had no answer. Because in 500 years of conquest, the empire had learned to break armies, cities, nations. But it had never learned to break women who sang in the dark. Faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is fear that refuses to be silent. The first 3 days they didn't speak. Not because Hasan Pasha had forbidden it, though he had, but because speaking required acknowledging where they were, and none of them were ready for that yet. So they sat in darkness, listening to each other breathe, counting the hours by the sound of boots passing the door. Every 2 hours, precise as a metronome. The empire ran on schedules. On the 4th morning, or what they assumed was morning time, had already started to blur. The door opened. Torchlight stabbed into the cell like a physical blow. They shielded their eyes, blinking against the sudden brightness. A eunuch stood in the doorway. Tall, soft-featured, his voice, neither male nor female, but something deliberately erased. You. He pointed at Eleni, Anna, and 3 others. Kitchen duty. Follow. They were led up through corridors that seemed designed to disorient, left, right, upstairs, downstairs, through passages that doubled back on themselves. The palace was a labyrinth, intentionally. Servants weren't supposed to know how to leave, The kitchen stretched the length of a cathedral, vaulted ceilings, copper pots hanging like church bells, fires roaring in ovens that could roast whole oxen. The heat hit them like walking into August. Hundreds of servants moved in choreographed chaos, chopping, stirring, kneading, none of them looking at each other, all of them focused on their singular tasks. You wash. The eunuch pointed at stone basins the size of coffins. Every pot, every pan, every plate from last night's feast. When you finish, there will be more. When those are finished, there will be more again. This is your life now. Questions. Eleni opened her mouth. That was rhetorical, the eunuch said. Get to work. The water was cold enough to ache. Their hands turned red, then white, then finally numb. They scrubbed in silence, while around them the palace machine churned, preparing breakfast for 1,000 officials, lunch for the Sultan's favorites, dinner for visiting dignitaries who would never know Christian nuns had washed their plates. Don't look up, Anna whispered suddenly. Someone's watching. Eleni felt it too, eyes on her back assessing. She kept scrubbing, but her peripheral vision caught movement. A woman in silk robes, older Turkish, standing in the kitchen doorway with the posture of someone who owned the space. Her gaze moved across the new servants like a buyer examining livestock. Those are the monastery women. The woman's voice carried authority. Yes, Lady Fatima, the eunuch bowed. From Thessaly. How long until they break? Hassan Pasha estimates a month. I give them 2 weeks. Lady Fatima moved closer. Eleni could smell her perfume rosewater and something darker musk, maybe. The woman reached out and lifted Eleni's chin, forcing eye contact. Do you know who I am? Eleni said nothing. I run this palace. Every servant, every slave, every concubine answers to me. Hassan Pasha may have brought you here, but I decide if you eat, if you sleep, if you survive. She released Eleni's chin. Work hard, keep silent, and you'll be invisible. Invisible servants live longest. Cause trouble, and you'll discover there are fates worse than your cell. Understand? Eleni nodded. Good, because the moment you forget, I'll remind you. Lady Fatima left. The kitchen resumed its rhythm. But something had shifted. They weren't just prisoners anymore. They were pieces on a board, and the game had rules they didn't know yet. That night, back in the cell, Mother Anastasia gathered them close. We need to pray. The guards, Sister Irene started. Will hear us if we're loud, Anastasia finished, so we'll be quiet. They formed a circle in the darkness, hands touching hands, creating a chain of contact, and they began to whisper the Lord's Prayer, the Nicene Creed, the Kyrie eleison. So quiet it was barely breath. But in that enclosed space, the whispers resonated, bouncing off stone, creating harmonics that sounded almost like singing. The boots passed outside, paused. Everyone froze. The boots moved on. Tomorrow, Anastasia whispered, we do it again, and the day after, and the day after that. They can take our freedom, but they cannot take our ritual. Ritual is how we remember who we are. And who are we? Sister Maria asked, not the scholar Maria who died on the road, but another Maria younger, her voice brittle with fear. Are we still nuns if we have no monastery? Are we still Christians if we can't worship? We're still human, Eleni said. That's enough to start with. Weeks blurred into each other. Work, sell, work, sell. Their hands cracked and bled from the washing water. Their backs bent from carrying buckets. Their voices grew hoarse from whispered prayers. But they adapted. Humans always adapt. That's the terrible gift of survival. You learn to normalize anything. One morning, Sister Anna didn't return from kitchen duty. They waited through the day, through the night, into the next morning. When the door opened, Anna stumbled in, moving wrong, holding her ribs. What happened? Eleni caught her before she fell. I dropped a plate. Anna's voice was mechanical. Lady Fatima said waste has consequences. She lifted her sleeve. Purple bruises covered her forearm in the shape of fingers. She had guards hold me down while she beat me with a cane. 12 strikes, 1 for each silver piece the plate cost. Anna's eyes were dry. She'd moved past crying into some harder place. She made the other servants watch. She said, this is what resistance looks like. Mother Anastasia's jaw clenched. We need to what? Anna cut her off. Fight back. They'll kill us. Escape. We don't know the way out. Complain to who we're alone here. Completely alone. The silence that followed was worse than screaming. Finally, Sister Irene spoke, her voice ancient and tired. Then we endure, because that's all that's left. But endurance has a cost. They began to see it in each other's eyes, the way faith erodes like stone under water. So slowly you don't notice, until suddenly there's a hole where something solid used to be. 3 months in, they discovered they weren't the only secrets the palace kept. Eleni was carrying water through a service corridor when she heard singing. Not Islamic prayer, not Turkish folk songs, but something else. Latin. She stopped listening. The sound came from behind a wall, muffled but unmistakable. "Who are you?" she whispered to the stone. No answer. But the singing continued, a Catholic hymn, pre-schism, the kind that hadn't been sung in the East for 400 years. That night she told the others, "There are more prisoners. Not prisoners. Something else." Eleni pressed her palm to the wall. "I think there are people living inside the walls themselves. Permanent servants who never leave. Who've been here so long they've forgotten the outside exists." "That's insane," Sister Maria said. "Is it? We've been here 3 months and we're already losing days. Imagine 3 years, 30 years. How long until we become the walls?" The question hung in the darkness like smoke. "Never," Mother Anastasia said firmly. "Because we remember. We keep our rituals. We carve our crosses." "Carve?" Sister Irene laughed bitterly. "With what? Our fingernails?" "Yes. And that's exactly what they did. It started with Eleni. One night, unable to sleep, she dragged her fingernail across the stone wall. It hurt, the nail split, blood welled up, but it left a mark. Faint, barely visible. But there, she carved a cross, tiny, imperfect, but undeniably Christian. The next night, Anna carved one beside it. Then Irene. Then Maria. Then all 21 of them, taking turns bleeding into the stone, creating a constellation of faith that said, "We were here. We existed. We did not surrender." Within a month, the wall was covered. Hundreds of crosses overlapping, intersecting, creating patterns that looked almost like script. A language of defiance written in blood and calcium and sheer stubborn will. "The guards will see someone worried. Let them," Anastasia said. "What will they do? Erase them. We'll carve more. Kill us. We're dead already. We're just refusing to admit it." But the guards didn't see, because guards don't look at prisoners. They look through them. And the crosses multiplied. 6 months in, something broke. Sister Sophia, 43 years old, silent for weeks, stood up during their whispered prayers and screamed. Not words, just sound, raw and primal and utterly human. The boots outside stopped immediately. Keys rattled. The door flew open. 3 guards rushed in, grabbed Sophia, dragged her out. She didn't resist, didn't fight, just kept screaming, her voice echoing through stone corridors, getting fainter and fainter until it disappeared entirely. They never saw her again. That night, Lady Fatima came personally. "You have a choice," she said, torch casting her shadow across the cell like something demonic. "Continue this pathetic resistance, and I will break you one by one, or accept your situation with grace and your lives will improve. Better food, warmer blankets, perhaps even sunlight." Mother Anastasia stood slowly, her 72-year-old body trembling but unbowed. Where is Sister Sophia? In a quieter place, where she can't disturb the palace peace. Is she alive? Lady Fatima smiled, the cruelest expression Eleni had ever seen. Define alive. Her heart beats, her lungs breathe. But her mind, that's gone to whatever God you think is listening. She'll spend the rest of her days rocking in a cell, singing to ghosts. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. That's what happens to nuns who scream. Remember that. After she left, they sat in silence for hours. Finally, young Anna spoke. Maybe we should accept. Maybe resistance is just pride. Maybe God wants us to survive, not to be martyrs. You think survival means surrender? Eleni's voice came out sharper than intended. I think survival means living long enough to escape, to tell our story, to warn others. Anna's face was invisible in darkness, but her voice carried conviction. Dead martyrs can't warn anyone. Neither can broken servants who forgot they were ever human, Anastasia countered. The moment we accept this, we become what they want, compliant, silent, erased. And the moment we're all like Sophia, we become nothing, Anna shot back. There has to be a middle path. There is no middle path in captivity, Irene said quietly. There's only resistance or collaboration, and collaboration is just slow-motion suicide of the soul. But doubt had been planted. In the weeks that followed, they felt it growing like mold in darkness. The terrible question, what if survival matters more than integrity? Two of the younger nuns started accepting extra food from kitchen servants in exchange for silence during prayer time. Another stopped carving crosses. Another asked Lady Fatima how one converts to Islam, what the process involves, whether it hurts. The group was fracturing. One night, Eleni found Mother Anastasia alone in the corner, her hands moving in darkness. What are you doing? Counting. There were 21 of us. Now there are 20. Sophia is gone. 2 have stopped praying. 3 have stopped carving. How many will we be by next year at 51? We can't think like that. Why not? It's the truth. Captivity doesn't kill you all at once. It takes pieces. First your routine, then your rituals, then your faith, then your name. And finally, if you last that long, it takes your memory of who you were before. We're not dying, Eleni. We're evaporating. Eleni sat beside her shoulder to shoulder in the dark. Then we make ourselves harder to erase. We carve deeper. We sing louder. We refuse to evaporate. For how long? As long as it takes. And what if it takes forever? Eleni didn't answer because she didn't have one. In the silence, she heard it, that Latin singing again coming through the walls. Whoever they were, they'd been here longer than the nuns could imagine, and they were still singing. Listen, Eleni whispered. They're still here, still human, still remembering. If they can last, so can we. Anastasia tilted her head, listening to the muffled hymn. Or maybe that's what we sound like from the outside. Ghosts who don't know they're already dead. The singing continued, neither hopeful nor despairing, just persistent. The sound of souls refusing to be silent, even when silence would be easier. And in that moment, Eleni understood this was the real torture. Not pain, not hunger, not even isolation. The real torture was time, endless grinding time, that forced you to watch yourself change, to feel your certainties become questions, your convictions become doubts, until you couldn't remember what you'd been so sure about in the first place. The guard's boots passed outside, steady, reliable, marking time like a metronome counting down to nothing. Martyrdom is easy. It's over in minutes. Captivity is martyrdom in slow motion stretched across decades, and it never grants you the mercy of an ending. The Latin singing stopped on a Tuesday, or what they thought was Tuesday. Time had become fluid, marked only by meals and guard rotations and the slow accumulation of crosses on the wall. Do you hear that? Anna pressed her ear to the stone. The singing. It's gone. They listened. Nothing but silence from the other side, thick and final as a grave. Maybe they were moved, Sister Maria offered, but her voice carried no conviction. Or maybe they died, Irene said flatly. How long do you think people last in here? We're 9 months in and already losing ourselves. Imagine 20 years, 30. At some point, your body just gives up. Eleni traced her fingers over the crosses they'd carved, thousands now layered so thick the stone felt almost warm, as if the faith embedded in it had generated its own heat. Then we make sure we're remembered better than they were. We carve our names. Hassan Pasha will see, someone warned. Good. Let him see. Let them all see that we existed, that we had names, that we were people. Eleni's fingernail was already moving, scratching letters into stone. Eleni. The nail split. Blood welled. She kept going. One by one, they joined her. 20 names carved in blood and calcium, each letter a small rebellion, each word a refusal to disappear. When they finished, the wall read like a memorial, except they weren't dead yet. They were just preparing for the inevitable. The door opened during their carving. They froze. But it wasn't guards. It was a boy, maybe 12, Turkish, carrying bread, still warm from the ovens. He stared at them at the wall covered in crosses and names, his eyes wide with something between fear and wonder. "Who are you?" Eleni asked in Turkish. She'd been picking up words from the kitchen. The boy swallowed hard. "I'm nobody. He thrust the bread forward. "My mother said to bring this. She said Christians need to eat too." "Your mother? She works in the kitchens. She sees how they treat you. She wanted..." He stopped, struggling for words. "She wanted you to know someone notices." He set the bread down and ran before they could respond, his footsteps echoing away into darkness. They stared at the still warm loaf. "It could be poisoned," Irene said. "It could be mercy," Anna countered. Mother Anastasia picked it up, broke it, examined it. Then she tore off a piece and ate it. They waited. Nothing happened except she started crying, not from pain, but from the sudden overwhelming kindness of warm bread after months of cold gruel. "Someone remembers we're human," she whispered. "Someone in this entire empire still remembers." They shared the bread in silence, each bite an act of communion of faith, not in God, but in the stubborn persistence of human decency, even in systems designed to erase it. The boy came back 3 nights later, and again a week after that, each time with bread, sometimes with cheese, once with a cloth soaked in oil for their cracked hands. He never stayed long, never asked for anything, just delivered his small rebellions and disappeared. "What's your name?" Eleni asked on his 5th visit. "Mehmet. Why do you help us?" He looked at the crosses on the wall, at their bleeding fingers, at their faces marked by months of darkness. "Because my mother says the empire is strong when it shows mercy, not when it shows cruelty. She says the Sultan would be ashamed if he knew what happens in his own palace." "The Sultan knows," Irene said bitterly. "He ordered it." "No." Mehmet's voice was firm, with the certainty of childhood. "The Sultan is just. It's the advisors, the administrators, people like Hassan Pasha and Lady Fatima who twist his orders. They're the ones who follow orders perfectly," Eleni interrupted gently. "Mehmet, your faith in justice is beautiful, but this is justice in the empire. This is what happens when one civilization conquers another. We're not victims of corruption. We're products of policy." The boy's face crumpled. He was too young to understand what she was really saying, that his kindness, while precious, couldn't fix a system built on subjugation. "I should go," he whispered and fled. He didn't come back after that. But the bread kept coming now, left outside the door, anonymous, consistent. Mehmet's mother continuing what her son had started, proving that resistance doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes it looks like warm bread in darkness. Year 2 began with winter. They felt it even underground, the temperature dropping until their breath formed clouds, until the stone walls sweated with condensation that froze into patterns like frost on windows. Their thin clothes offered no protection. They huddled together at night, 20 bodies trying to generate enough heat to survive until morning. Sister Maria, the younger, stopped waking up one morning. She'd simply frozen to death in her sleep, her face peaceful, her fingers still clutching her rosary. They held her body until the guards came, until Lady Fatima ordered it removed, until she was carried away to whatever the palace did with dead servants. 19 now. "We're dying." Anna said that night, stating the obvious because sometimes the obvious needs to be spoken. Not dramatically, not as martyrs just dying like livestock. Slow, unremarkable, forgotten. "Then we need to be remembered louder," Eleni said. "How we've carved our names. We've carved 1,000 crosses. What else is there? Eleni's eyes caught torchlight from the corridor. We write our story, not just names everything. What happened to us, who we were, why we're here. We turn this wall into a testament. We don't have tools. We don't have ink. We have fingernails. We have blood. We have time. That's enough. And so they began the great work, each woman contributing what she remembered: the monastery in Thessaly, the Ottoman arrival, Hassan Pasha's ultimatum, Theodora's death, the march, the ship, the cell. They carved in shifts, taking turns wearing their fingernails down to the quick bleeding into stone, creating a historical record written in pain. The guards noticed after a week. "What are they doing in there?" one asked his partner. "Who cares, as long as they're quiet?" But Lady Fatima cared. She descended one night with torches and fury, her silk robes whispering against stone like angry snakes. "What is this?" She gestured at the wall now covered in text, Greek letters, packed so dense they formed almost solid darkness. "What have you done?" "We've written our testimony," Mother Anastasia said, "for whoever finds this place after we're gone. No one will find it. This cell will be sealed when you die. Your testimony will rot with your bones. Maybe, or maybe in 100 years someone renovating will break through this wall and read what happened here. Either way, we've done what we can. We've refused to vanish." Lady Fatima stepped closer, her face twisted with something between rage and fear. "You think you're noble? You're pathetic. You could have converted, could have been comfortable, could have had dignity. Instead, you chose this bleeding in darkness, writing messages no one will read, dying for nothing." "We're dying for something," Anna said quietly. "We just don't know what it is yet. Maybe that's what faith means, doing the right thing, even when you can't see the purpose." Lady Fatima slapped her. Hard. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "You want to know the truth? Hassan Pasha has a new policy. Any prisoner who hasn't converted after 2 years gets transferred. Not killed, transferred. To the galleys, to the mines, to wherever the empire needs bodies that can work until they drop. You have 3 months. After that, you'll wish you'd died in this cell." She left. The threat hung in the air like smoke. "The galleys," Sister Irene whispered. "I've heard about them. Chained to oars, rowing until your muscles tear, surviving on a handful of grain and salt water. Most men last 6 months." "We're not men," Eleni said. "Exactly. We'll last 3. The mathematics of survival had become brutally simple. Convert or transfer or die or be forgotten. They were running out of options, running out of time, running out of reasons to keep resisting. "Maybe we should convert," someone said in darkness. Eleni couldn't tell who. "If we're going to die anyway, why die harder? Because dying easy means they were right about us," Mother Anastasia answered. "Means we were never serious about our faith, just playing dress-up in habits until reality got uncomfortable. I won't give them that satisfaction." "Satisfaction." The voice rose desperate now. "They don't care about our satisfaction. We could convert or stay Christian live or die. It means nothing to them. We're not heroes in their story. We're footnotes. We're administrative problems being solved. Then let's be the kind of problem that leaves scars." 2 months before their deadline, Hassan Pasha came personally. He'd aged, his beard had gone gray. His eyes had developed lines that suggested sleepless nights. He stood in the doorway holding a torch, staring at the wall of text they'd created. "I've been governor for 17 years, he said quietly. "I've converted thousands, relocated tens of thousands, built mosques on church foundations from Anatolia to the Balkans. I've turned Christian cities into Muslim ones, erased centuries of history, rewritten whole regions. It's what I do. It's what the empire requires." He paused, his eyes scanning the Greek letters. "But I've never met anyone like you. Most people break. They convert, or they die, or they go mad. You've done none of those things. You've just persisted, and honestly, I don't know what to do with that." "You could let us go," Anna said. Hassan Pasha laughed not cruelly, but with genuine surprise. "Child, I can't let you go. You're proof that the empire's mercy has limits. You're evidence that conversion can be refused. You're dangerous not because of what you might do, but but because of what you represent. And what's that? That faith can outlast empires, that some things can't be conquered. That's a terrifying idea for people like me who've spent our lives believing conquest solves everything. He turned to leave, then stopped. The deadline stands. 3 months. Convert or transfer. But I want you to know I don't enjoy this. I'm just doing my duty. So were we, Eleni said. That's why we're still here. After he left, they sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Mother Anastasia spoke. We need to decide, together. Do we convert to save our lives? Do we accept transfer and die as laborers? Or do we find a third option? What third option? Irene asked. I don't know yet, but there's always a third option. We just have to be desperate enough to see it. They prayed that night, not whispering, not hiding, but aloud in full voice, singing hymns that echoed through the palace foundations like battle cries. The guards came running, pounded on the door, threatened punishment. The nuns sang louder. And somewhere in the palace above, servants paused in their work, listening to voices that refused to be silent, wondering what kind of people could sing in captivity, what kind of faith could survive being buried alive. The sound carried through stone and timber and marble, reaching places it wasn't meant to reach, reminding everyone who heard it that somewhere beneath their feet, women were refusing to disappear. And that refusal, that simple act of staying human in a system designed to erase humanity, was more dangerous than any weapon. The empire could conquer cities, but it couldn't conquer the stubborn human insistence on meaning the refusal to accept that suffering might be random, that resistance might be futile, that some stories might not deserve an ending. The singing brought consequences faster than they expected. The next morning, Lady Fatima arrived with 6 guards and iron shackles. You sang, she said, her voice cold as the stone around them. You violated the single rule that allowed you this mercy. Now you learn what happens when mercy is refused. They chained Mother Anastasia's wrists to the wall, arms spread like crucifixion, feet barely touching ground. The old woman's face went white, but she didn't scream. She'll hang there for 3 days, Lady Fatima announced. No food, no water. If the rest of you sing again, it'll be 3 more days. Keep testing me, and I'll see how long a 73-year-old body can hang before it simply gives up. Take me instead. Eleni stepped forward. She's old. She won't survive this. That's the point. Lady Fatima's smile was surgical. You need to understand that resistance has escalating costs. First comfort, then dignity, then life. You're currently at stage 3. There is no stage 4. They left Anastasia hanging there, her breathing shallow, her lips moving in silent prayer. The other nuns stood helplessly watching their leader slowly crucified on Ottoman iron. We have to do something, Anna whispered. Like what? Irene's voice cracked. They have all the power. We have nothing. We have each other, Eleni said. That's not nothing. They took turns standing beneath Anastasia, holding her feet to take pressure off her arms, whispering prayers, dripping water from their own meager rations onto her cracked lips. The guards didn't stop them. The cruelty wasn't in preventing comfort. It was in making them watch someone they loved die by inches. On the second day, Anastasia started hallucinating. The monastery, she whispered, her eyes unfocused. The bells are ringing. Can you hear them? It's morning matins. We need to attend service. We're here, Mother, Eleni said, supporting her feet. Right here with you. No, you're in Thessaly, in the garden. The herbs need watering. The oregano is dying. Someone water the oregano. I'll water it, Mother, I promise. Good girl. Anastasia's head lolled forward. I'm so tired. Can I sleep now? Not yet. Stay with us, please. But she was already leaving, traveling backwards through memory to happier times when monasteries still had bells, and gardens still had herbs, and the future still held possibility instead of just different variations of suffering. On the 3rd day, Hassan Pasha descended with a physician. Enough, he said quietly. Cut her down. Lady Fatima turned sharply. The 3 days aren't complete. I said cut her down. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd just made a decision that would cost him. This serves no purpose except cruelty for cruelty's sake. That's not what the Empire stands for. The Empire stands for obedience. They sang. She pays. She's paid. Now cut her down before I have you explain to the Sultan why we're torturing elderly women to death in his palace. The guards cut the chains. Anastasia collapsed into Eleni's arms, unconscious, barely breathing. The physician, a Greek man Christian, his eyes carefully neutral, examined her quickly. Dehydration, muscle damage, possible organ failure. She needs rest, water, and food. She might survive. Emphasis on might. Do what you can, Hassan Pasha said. After they'd gotten water into Anastasia and laid her on the coldest part of the floor to reduce swelling, Eleni confronted the truth they'd all been avoiding. We can't win this. They'll kill us all eventually, quick or slow, it doesn't matter. We're going to die in this hole and no one will remember. Our crosses, our names, our testimony, it'll all be sealed away and forgotten. We need to face that. Then what do we do? Anna asked. She'd turned 17 down here, had her birthday in darkness with nothing to mark it except another scratch on the wall. If we can't win, why keep fighting? Because fighting is how we stay human. The moment we stop resisting, we become what they want. Empty bodies performing empty tasks until we're empty corpses. I'd rather die fighting than live compliant. That's easy to say when you're not the one hanging from chains, Sister Irene said bitterly. She'd aged terribly down here, her hair gone completely white, her hands twisted with arthritis. Some of us just want to survive. Is that so wrong? No, but surviving by becoming someone else isn't survival. It's just a slower form of death. Mother Anastasia stirred, her eyes opening to slits. Stop arguing, she rasped. Both of you are right. Both of you are wrong. We need a third way. You keep saying that. What third way? We make them remember us. Not as victims, as voices. We become the song that won't die. She closed her eyes again, exhausted from even that small speech, but her words hung in the air like incense. The deadline arrived on a Thursday. Hassan Pasha came with documents and an interpreter. This is your final opportunity, he said, and for the first time he sounded tired. Convert to Islam and you'll be transferred to a women's charitable institution in the city. You'll teach, you'll serve, but you'll live in daylight with proper food and beds and dignity. Or refuse, and you'll be sent to the textile workshops. 16-hour days. No rest, no mercy. Most workers last 2 years before their bodies give out. You're already weak. You won't last 6 months. Those aren't our only options, Eleni said. Yes, they are. No, we have a third option. We stay here, in this cell, permanently. We stop working above. We stop serving the palace. We just stay here and pray and wait for God or death, whichever comes first. Hassan Pasha stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're choosing death by starvation. Slow, agonizing death in darkness. We're choosing fidelity. If those are the same thing, then so be it. This is insane. This is faith. You've never understood the difference. He looked at each of them, 19 women ranging from 17 to 73, all of them staring back with that peculiar mixture of fear and defiance that he'd spent 17 years trying to break and had never quite managed. I can't allow this. If you won't work, you'll be forced. If you resist, you'll be punished. This isn't martyrdom, this is suicide with extra steps. Then punish us, force us, do whatever you need to do. We're not converting, and we're not serving the empire that destroyed our lives. Those are the only certainties we have left. Hassan Pasha was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, almost human. Do you know what's happening in Anatolia right now? Churches are becoming mosques. Christian communities are converting en masse. In 50 years, there won't be any Christians left in these territories, just Muslims who remember their grandparents used to pray differently. That's how empires work. They don't destroy, they assimilate. You're fighting against historical inevitability. Maybe, or maybe in 500 years, someone will find this cell and read what we wrote and realize that history isn't inevitable. It's chosen. Every single day, people choose whether to resist or comply, and those choices matter even when they lose. They don't matter. No one will remember you. You'll remember us, Anna said quietly. You come down here every few months. You argue with us. You try to convince us. If we didn't matter, you'd have forgotten us already. But we're in your head. We're the ones who said no when everyone else said yes. That haunts you. For the first time, Hassan Pasha had no response. He simply turned and left his footsteps echoing away into silence. They didn't work the next day, or the day after. The food stopped coming, not gradually, just stopped. The cell door stayed locked. They'd made their choice, and the Empire had made its response. You want to stay in the cell. Stay in the cell. Permanently. The first week was bearable. They had water from condensation on the walls. They prayed to keep their minds occupied. They carved more crosses, more text turning the entire cell into a manuscript of faith written in blood and calcium. The second week, hunger became a physical presence. Their stomachs cramped. Their hands trembled. Sister Irene developed a cough that rattled in her chest like dice in a cup. They started sleeping more, conserving energy, drifting in and out of consciousness. We're dying, Maria said on day 10. Statement of fact, no emotion. We chose this. We're actually dying. We were always dying, Mother Anastasia replied, her voice a whisper. Now we're just doing it deliberately. There's dignity in that. Is there? I can't tell anymore. Dignity and delusion look the same from the inside. On day 12, something changed. The door opened. Not guards, the young Turkish boy Mehmet, now 13 taller, his voice deeper. Behind him, his mother face covered eyes determined. Quickly, she hissed, before the guards return. They brought food, bread, cheese, dried meat, dates, more than the nuns had seen in months. And something else, a small oil lamp, the kind that burns for days on a single filling. Why? Eleni asked. Why risk this? Mehmet's mother spoke for the first time, her Greek accented but clear. Because my husband died in the conquest of Constantinople. He was a Janissary, a good Muslim, loyal to the Sultan. But before he died, he told me something. He said the worst thing about conquest isn't the killing, it's the forgetting. He said we erase people and then erase the fact that we erased them. He made me promise I'd remember, that I'd never let them be forgotten. We're Christian, your enemy. You're human, my responsibility. There's a difference. She pressed the oil lamp into Eleni's hands. Keep this burning. As long as it burns, you're still here. You still exist. You're still voices that matter. They fled before questions could be asked. The nuns stared at the lamp's small clay ordinary. But it was light. In that moment, it was everything. We keep it burning, Mother Anastasia said. No matter what, it becomes our symbol. As long as that light exists, so do we. They rationed the oil carefully. One wick, small flame, just enough to see each other's faces. They took turns guarding it, making sure it never went out, treating it with the reverence usually reserved for altar candles. The food kept coming, irregular, unpredictable, but consistent enough to keep them alive. Mehmet and his mother conducting their small rebellion, proving that even in systems built on cruelty, individuals could choose differently. But winter came harder that year. The cold seeped through stone like water through cloth. Sister Irene's cough worsened. On a night when frost formed patterns on the walls, she simply stopped breathing, her final exhale forming a cloud that dissipated into nothing. 18 now. They buried her in the corner, using their hands to dig into the dirt floor, laying her body to rest in earth that would never see sun. They marked the spot with stones arranged in a cross pattern. We're running out of corner, someone said. Dark humor born from months of darkness. Then we make more room, Anastasia replied. We dig deeper. We remember harder. We refuse to let them forget harder. That night, as the oil lamp burned its steady light, Eleni carved one final message on the wall. Not in Greek, this time in Latin, the universal language of scholarship, the language that might outlast both Christianity and Islam. Lux in tenebris, lucet et tenebrae, eam non comprehenderunt. The light shines in darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. What does it say? Anna asked. It says we're still here, that's all. That's enough. The lamp burned, the crosses multiplied. The names remained carved in stone, and somewhere above them, the Ottoman Empire continued its inexorable expansion, conquering cities, and erasing histories, and building new worlds on the bones of old ones. But in that cell, 19 women, soon to be 18, then 17, then fewer, kept a lamp burning and refused to be erased. And that refusal, that stubborn insistence on existing when existence itself was rebellion, became the thing that would outlast everything else. Years would pass, decades, centuries. Empires would rise and fall. The Ottoman Palace would become a museum. The world would forget why the cell existed, or who had lived there, or what they'd carved into its walls. But the lamp would be found centuries later. Its wick petrified but intact, sitting in a corner surrounded by crosses and names and testimony written in blood and faith and the absolute unwillingness to disappear. Sometimes survival isn't about living, it's about making sure something of you remains after you're gone. Even if it's just a word carved in stone, or a lamp that burned long after its keepers died. The lamp burned for 43 years. Not continuously, that would have been impossible, but the nuns kept refilling it drop by drop with oil that appeared irregularly through cracks in the door. Gifts from Mehmet's mother and eventually from Mehmet himself, now a grown man with children of his own, who'd inherited his mother's quiet rebellion. 43 years of darkness punctuated by that single flame. 43 years of women dying one by one until there were only 7 left. Then 5. Then 3. Sister Eleni was 61 years old when Mother Anastasia finally died. The old woman had lasted to 91, impossible by any medical standard, sustained by nothing but stubbornness and faith, and the absolute refusal to let her death be the thing that broke the others. "I'm tired," Anastasia whispered on her last night, her voice barely breath. "So tired." "Then rest," Eleni said, holding her hand. "You've earned it." Did any of this mean anything? It was the question Eleni had been avoiding for 4 decades. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe meaning is something that happens later, after we're gone. Maybe we'll never know if this mattered." "That's a terrible answer." "It's the only honest one I have." Anastasia smiled, actually smiled, her ancient face creasing with something almost like peace. "Then I'll die not knowing. I can live with that." She paused, realizing what she'd said. "Or die with it, I suppose." Her hand went slack in Eleni's grip. Her breathing stopped. And just like that, the woman who'd led them through 43 years of captivity was gone. They buried her next to the others, 18 graves now in the dirt floor, marked with stone crosses. The cell had become a catacomb, a memorial to women the world had forgotten, but who refused to forget themselves. 3 remained: Eleni, Anna, and Sister Helen, who'd been 16 when they arrived, and was now 59, her entire adult life spent in this hole. "We're the last ones," Anna said. She was 46, her hair completely gray, her hands gnarled from decades of carving. "When we die, the story ends." "No," Eleni said. "The story continues. It just continues without us." "Who's going to tell it? The guards, Lady Fatima. They want us forgotten. Then we make ourselves harder to forget. We finish the wall. Every inch, every surface. We turn this entire cell into a book that can't be burned." And that's what they did. For the next 17 years, 3 women carved their testimony into every available surface, walls, floor, even the ceiling when they could reach it. They carved the names of everyone who died, the dates as best they could remember them. The story of the monastery in Thessaly, Hassan Pasha's ultimatum, Theodora's death, the march, the ship, the decades of captivity. They carved in Greek and Latin and even Turkish, learned painstakingly from decades of listening to guards, so that whoever found this place, whatever language they spoke, would understand what had happened here. The lamp kept burning, though the women tending it grew older, weaker, closer to death with each passing winter. Hassan Pasha came one final time when Eleni was 74. He was ancient now, bent with age, his beard completely white, his hands trembling with palsy. He stood in the doorway, leaning on a cane, staring at 3 old women and a cell transformed into a manuscript. "I'm dying," he said without preamble. "Cancer. The physicians give me 3 months. I came to see you one last time." "Why?" Eleni's voice was harsh from decades of damp air. "To gloat. To see that you outlasted us." "No. To apologize." The word hung in the air like smoke. "I've spent my entire life serving the empire, building mosques on church foundations, converting populations, erasing histories. I told myself it was duty, that empires require hard men, making hard choices, that history would vindicate me." He paused, his eyes scanning the carved walls. "But looking at what you've created down here, I realize I was wrong. History won't vindicate me. History will forget me entirely. But you 3, you might actually be remembered." "We'll be dead," Anna said flatly. "So will I. But your names are carved in stone. Mine is written in administrative documents that will turn to dust. You'll outlast me. That's what I came to say. You won." "This wasn't a competition," Eleni said. "Everything is a competition when empires are involved, and you won. Not because you survived, you barely survived, but because you made your suffering mean something. You turned pain into testimony. That's more than I ever did." He turned to leave, then stopped. "The lamp. I'll make sure it's refilled. For as long as you live, it won't go out. That's the least I can do. We don't want your mercy." "I know. Take it anyway." He died 3 weeks later, but true to his word, the oil kept coming. Sister Helen died the following spring. Just went to sleep one night and didn't wake up, her face peaceful, her hands folded over her chest like she'd planned it. They buried her next to the others. 19 graves now. 2 remained. Eleni was 78, Anna was 60. They'd spent most of their lives in this cell. Eleni, 52 years, Anna, 47. The world outside had changed in ways they couldn't imagine. The Ottoman Empire had reached its peak and started its decline. New technologies, new ideas, new empires were rising. And in this cell beneath Topkapi Palace, 2 old women kept a lamp burning and carved crosses into stone. "Do you think anyone will find us?" Anna asked one night. "Eventually. Empires fall. Palaces become museums. Walls get renovated. Someone will break through and find this place. And then what? And then they'll read our testimony. They'll see our names. They'll know we existed, that we resisted, that we refused to disappear. That's all we can hope for." "Is it enough?" Eleni looked at the lamp, its small flame casting shadows that danced across walls covered in crosses and names, and the desperate testament of women who'd had nothing left but their refusal to be silent. "It has to be." Anna died in winter during the coldest night Eleni could remember. They were sleeping huddled together for warmth, a habit from decades of survival, and when Eleni woke, Anna's body was cold beside her. One remained. Eleni was 81 years old. She'd been in this cell for 55 years. She was the last witness, the final voice, the only one left who remembered Thessaly and the monastery and the sound of bells that had been silent for more than half a century. She carved Anna's name into the wall with fingers so arthritic she could barely hold them straight. 20 graves now. 20 women who'd refused to convert, refused to serve, refused to disappear. "I'm the last one," she said aloud, her voice echoing in the cell that had become her entire world. "When I die, who's going to remember you?" The lamp flickered but held steady. She spent her final months carving one last message, not in Greek or Latin or Turkish, but in all 3 languages, repeated over and over until it covered an entire wall. "We were 23 women from the monastery of St. Catherine in Thessaly. We were captured in 1463. We refused to convert. We died here, but we died as ourselves. Remember us." Below it, she carved all 23 names, including her own, because she knew she'd be dead soon and wanted to make sure anyone who found this place would know exactly who had suffered here. The lamp burned. Winter came. Eleni grew weaker. On what she somehow knew would be her last night, she dragged herself to the lamp and looked at it. Really looked at it, this small clay vessel that had burned for 55 years, sustained by the secret kindness of strangers who'd risked everything to keep 3 old women's hope alive. "Thank you, Mehmet," she whispered to the darkness. "Thank you to your mother. Thank you to everyone who remembered we were human." She lay down next to Anna's grave, her hand resting on the stone cross that marked it. "I'm coming," she said. "All of you, I'm coming." The lamp burned through the night. By morning, its light illuminated not 20 women, but 21. The testimony was complete. The cell went silent. The lamp burned for 3 more days, then finally guttered out. Its oil, exhausted, its purpose fulfilled. The door was sealed shortly after. Palace administrators, noting that the prisoners had finally died, simply bricked over the entrance and forgot about it. The cell became a void space in architectural plans, an unexplained gap in the foundation, a mystery that no one bothered to solve because no one remembered it existed. 134 years passed. The Ottoman Empire fell. The palace became a museum. Renovations began to preserve what was now considered cultural heritage. In 1915, workers breaking through a wall to install modern plumbing found something unexpected: a sealed chamber filled with crosses and names and text in 3 languages covering every surface. And in the center of the room, an oil lamp sitting upright on the floor, its wick intact, surrounded by 21 small crosses made of stones. The discovery made headlines in Istanbul newspapers for exactly 1 day before World War I rendered everything else irrelevant. The chamber was photographed, catalogued, and sealed again, its contents too complex to deal with during wartime. 53 years later, in 1968, a graduate student named Daria, studying Ottoman architectural records, stumbled across the photographs in a forgotten archive. She saw the walls covered in text, saw the names, saw the testimony, and realized what she was looking at: a time capsule of resistance, a manuscript written in blood and faith by women the empire had tried to erase. She spent 3 years translating the text, cross-referencing names with monastery records, piecing together the story of 23 nuns from Thessaly, who'd been captured in 1463 and died in captivity over the course of 5 decades, refusing to the very end to surrender their faith or their identity. Her dissertation, Voices in Stone, the testimony of the Topkapi 23, was published in 1971. It won awards. It was translated into 6 languages. It became required reading for scholars studying religious resistance under imperial occupation. But the real impact came later. In 1985, the cell was reopened and preserved as a memorial. Visitors could walk through it, see the walls covered in crosses, read the names of women who'd died there, touch the lamp that had burned through decades of darkness. And people came, thousands of them. Christians who saw martyrs, Muslims who saw victims of their own empire's cruelty, historians who saw evidence, artists who saw inspiration, all of them standing in a small underground cell reading testimony carved by bleeding fingers, confronting the reality that resistance doesn't always look heroic. Sometimes it just looks like endurance stretched across decades until endurance itself becomes heroism. In 2003, the Greek Orthodox Church canonized all 23 nuns as saints. Not because they performed miracles, but because they'd done something harder. They'd remained themselves when the entire world was telling them to become someone else. A small plaque was installed outside the cell. It reads, "Here lived and died 23 Christian nuns captured during the Ottoman expansion of 1463. They refused conversion and served their faith through 5 decades of captivity. Their testimony carved into these walls stands as evidence that some voices cannot be silenced, some stories cannot be erased, and some acts of resistance echo across centuries long after empires fall." The lamp was placed in a glass case, protected now, its wick visible, its clay surface marked with the fingerprints of women who'd kept it burning through impossible darkness. And on certain nights, guards swear this is true. Though no scientist has explained it, visitors claim to hear singing coming from the cell. 23 voices in harmony, singing hymns in Greek, their melody rising through stone and centuries, reminding everyone who hears it that the dead can still speak if you're willing to listen. Sister Eleni died believing her story would be forgotten. She was wrong. Her name is carved in stone in 4 languages. Her testimony has been read by hundreds of thousands of people. Her lamp burns metaphorically in every act of resistance against systems that demand conformity. The Ottoman Empire is gone. The monastery in Thessaly is ruins. Hassan Pasha is dust. Lady Fatima is forgotten. Even the Janissaries, who'd seemed so eternal, have disappeared into history. But Eleni's voice remains. All 23 voices remain, carved in stone, translated into books, whispered in memorial services, echoing through a museum where tourists from around the world pause and confront the simple truth that suffering, when transformed into testimony, can outlast everything that caused it. That's not the happy ending we want. There's no rescue, no reversal, no justice delivered in time to matter. Just women dying in darkness and centuries later being remembered for it. But maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all resistance ever was, the stubborn insistence that your pain means something, that your name matters, that your voice deserves to be heard, even if no one's listening yet. The lamp still sits in its glass case in the museum. The cell still stands beneath the palace. The crosses still cover the walls. And visitors still pause reading names carved by bleeding fingers, confronting the reality that faith isn't always rewarded. Resistance doesn't always win, and sometimes the only victory available is the refusal to be forgotten. 23 women from Thessaly chose that victory. And 500 years later, we're still saying their names. Empires measure success in territory conquered and populations converted. But history measures success differently, in voices that refuse to be silent, in names that refused to be erased, in lamps that kept burning long after darkness should have won. By that measure, 23 women in a cell defeated an empire. They just had to die first to do it. If you believe their names deserve to be remembered, share this story. Write a name in the comments. Eleni, Anna, Theodora, any of the 23. Let their voices echo one more time, because the only way stories die is when we stop telling them. And these women didn't carve crosses into stone with bleeding fingers for 5 decades just to be forgotten now.